The board, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Second? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Next, we're going to move on to public expression. Our first person is Lisa Esplin, who's going to be speaking with us school bus safety.
Hi, I'm Lisa Esplin, and I live at 3378 Lakeview Road, and I just wanted to speak tonight about my daughter's school bus transportation. She is in high school, and high schoolers sometimes have to cross the street to get on or off the bus. And as you know, it's a well-traveled road, speed limit is 45. People often drive a lot faster than that. On Monday, January 28th, her bus was hit as she was crossing the street. Thankfully, there were no injuries. I was out there at the time. And I have 4 other children that, will eventually be in high school. I don't want any of my children or anyone else's children to have to cross that road. So I was hoping that at some point, maybe the routes can be redone, something can change. It's just too dangerous. Thank you.
We'll have Mrs. Morris make contact with Fisher Bus. Okay.
Thank you.
Can we get back?
Yes, we will. We then have Laura Heater, who wants to speak with us concerning meetings.
Do I have to use microphone? Can you hear me? I'm Laura Peter. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a former special ed teacher, and I'm a parent of children in the district. Laura, pardon?
Could you use the speaking? People have reminded us too, and I think it does help
Is
people.
that okay? Hamburg is a close-knit community, and for good or bad, there's lots of news that seems to travel fast. I don't know if it's always been this way, but for the past few years, since we've been paying closer attention to the happenings on our school board, my husband and I have been appalled by some of the behavior we've seen displayed in the community by staff, by community members, by people representing our district. The petty alliances and backroom deals, the false pretenses of open meetings, and the general us versus them attitude of the various cliques within the board have made Hamburg a laughing stock in the local news and cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars. There seem to be several petty personal vendettas against each other, but at some point, we are all going to have to come to our senses and set these things aside for the good of the community and the good of our students. Forget the us versus them and realize that there is no them, only a we. Whatever you do as members of the board reflects on all of us. Open meetings means open meetings, not work out a deal ahead of time and then go through the motions to make it appear as if it is an open forum. H6 on our agenda, which is, I believe, the last item, is a resolution that will lead to these open discussions. I encourage the board to second the motion and to approve the resolution. This doesn't need to be a meeting of a he said, she said, this is why APPR failed, this is what went wrong. It needs to be a gathering for the good of all our students, because I believe, in fact, I hope that that's why we're all here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Martha Kavanaugh, who has something she wants to speak about.
My name is Martha Kavanaugh, and I'm an employee of the Hamburg Central School District. I work at the Hamburg High School. I teach 9th grade. As a reminder to the board, several months ago, I requested the board get microphones not only for the public, but also for the Board of Education. And I would encourage you to investigate the purchase of microphones for the Board of Education so those of us sitting in the gallery can hear what you're saying. The matter that I would like to bring before the Board of Education is an issue which does not affect me, but rather affects my colleagues, and I would say the majority of the employees of the Hamburg Central School District, and particularly the teachers, that were recently not compensated in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement. And I would ask the Board of Education to investigate the matter of the 22-week employees versus the 26-week employees, and the expectations of those employees in terms of their compensation. I think it caused a considerable amount of distress for many members of the faculty that were expecting one thing and received something quite different. And it is my expectation that the board will amicably resolve this matter for my colleagues so that this issue does not further cost the district additional funds in terms of conflicts with the collective bargaining agreement. So I would ask the Board of Education and the superintendent, as well as the personnel director, to investigate the payment of employees in terms of the collective bargaining agreement and the compensation they were due at the February 8th payment period. Thank you.
The board has prepared, Joe and I have prepared a statement in regards to what has happened with the APPR. As most of you know, the HTA and administration were unable to come to an agreement regarding the annual professional performance review plan prior to the January 17th deadline. We as the Hamburg Board of Education urge that everyone rise above our issues and do what is best for the students of Hamburg. It has been mandated into law by New York State that every district develops and adopts a plan which ultimately needs to be approved by the State Education Department. The law also states for any district that does not have an APPR plan in place by the imposed deadline, the current budget year's state aid increase for the district will be withheld. Hamburg's aid increase for the current budget year was approximately $450,000, and that amount will be deducted from our March aid payment. The Hamburg Board of Education feels it is imperative that all parties put aside any objections and come to an agreement on the plan. Again, this is a state mandate, and not completing the plan simply damages the district with the loss of funds. As the adults entrusted with the education of our youth, we all need to do what is ultimately best for our kids. As a district, we are now faced with a shortfall of $450,000 out of this year's budget. In the interest of trying to protect all of the current programs for our students for the remainder of this school year, we are looking at the ability to make up the shortfall by utilizing district reserve funds and fund balance while attempting to not make any reductions in staff or programs. This does leave us with the question, how are we going to proceed with the preparation for next year's budget? Barb Spores will be going over initial budget figures in greater detail later on, but the initial information from the state shows that the district will receive approximately $2 million additional in state aid for the next year. We've seen in the governor's budget that the deadline for the 2013-14 APPR plan will be September 1st, 2013. This places us in a very difficult position of developing a budget with the potential of a $2 million shortfall should we not have an approved plan by the deadline. Therefore, we are asking all parties to return to meaningful discussions and have a state-approved APPR in place prior to the final board budget approval in April, so that the increase can be included in the budget. The board will continue to work towards a resolution of the APPR plan while developing a budget that protects our programs and is fiscally responsible with our community's tax dollars. It is our belief that we can work together since we all have the same goal, which is to provide the best education for our kids.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask one question? I just one real quick question, and this is just maybe so we can kind of clarify, and even for myself. I mean, reading an APPR plan is like, to me, reading a legal document. I mean, it's
Very complicated.
extremely, but to make a long story short, the money. Now, we have our budget, and Barb, maybe you can answer this question, but we have our budget in place for this year, and I know there is a lot of talk. And there's talk all over, there's talk all over the state about this, that this APCR plan is actually costing districts more than what we're actually getting from the state. And from going through the budget process last year, okay, and from what I can recall, I'm not seeing, like, I tried to, like, I would implore anybody to try and show me how it's costing us more, and then we can say, okay, take your money. However, how is it costing, like, how much more money is it costing us to implement this? Because I know we have reduced everywhere. We've reduced administration, we've reduced staff, we've reduced everywhere. So, that 450,000 increase, which is what we did last year, correct? We didn't originally know we were going to get, it wasn't something we planned on?
No, the 450,000 is all it really is the difference in state aid from 11, 12, 13. So, in 12, 13, we were budgeted from the state to receive approximately $450,000 more than we received in 11 and 12. So that number we had last year at this time when it came out of the state aid run. And we used those numbers as our revenues for the fiscal year. So yes, we were counting on that money as part of our,
So yes, we were counting on that money when we developed our budget as a revenue stream, that we were going to get that.
Right.
Let me go back to the
Yeah,
question.
you go back to the
There are-
thing, you get what I'm trying
I
to
think
say.
what you have to separate is the New York State Education Department reform agenda versus the annual professional performance review. So the reform agenda carries with it certain initiatives that are part of the APPR process, but required by the state regardless of the APPR grant, which is the student learning objectives. Now, the student learning objectives in terms of where a cost element would be in there would be the assessments and also the curriculum in either, purchasing information or materials for the curriculum instruction or to develop those yourself. Either way, it takes time and resources to do that. The direct costs that would be associated with APPR, I would say number one is eDoctrina. Although eDoctrina, you could balance between something we could have that can be beneficial for us, and that is basically a data gathering and reporting system that once it's fully operable will really be an enhancement for teachers to look at student achievement data throughout the course of the year. The other part that we're looking into that we haven't purchased yet, but one of the biggest I say issues, but concerns with evaluations among buildings and in a district with many buildings would be the it's called inter-rater reliability. In other words, administrators being consistent from classroom to classroom, observing and then evaluating the teachers and putting that down on the rubric. And so we're looking into either a product called iObservation, which would carry with it a cost of slightly over $14,000. And another one is an app for an iPad that's being developed with another local school district. I believe that would cost around $10,000, Rick? About $6,000. So we're looking into, and those would be the direct costs associated with the implementation of APPR minus man hours and time spent there. Those are the direct costs associated.
And regardless of what it costs, it's required. We really don't have a choice per se. The districts.
The reform agenda is being implemented, and we don't have, there isn't a choice in terms of what we want to do or what we don't want to do. And the student learning objectives are part of the reform agenda that's required for us to have.
So it's not, and we basically trickled that increase in state aid down to the classroom. That's correct.
Correct.
First of all, I'm a board member here. I never saw the statement that was prepared by the board president and vice president. This is the first time hearing it.
I'm sorry, I thought it was sort of very general information. I apologize.
It was not conveyed to me. I certainly don't want anyone to have a misunderstanding that the teachers do not have an evaluation process in place they've had for years called HEMIO.
We weren't referring to that, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what, Hemio, excuse me. And Hemio has won many awards for observation of teachers, teacher evaluation. Also, another thing, when we talk about this particular situation, which I didn't know was going to be brought up at this particular juncture, the teachers were promised a curriculum. You take Union Pleasant, you may have 3 first grades, 3 second grades. They may have different teaching styles, but there are 3 different curriculums in the same building, let alone all the 4 other elementary buildings. That was promised to the teachers, it was never delivered. Those were some of the concerns. The things are, I think that the teachers, as you know, you've seen the charts, I saw the charts, it was very clear. They had an appeal process that I talked about with the board, and the appeals process that I read, no respectable union's ever going to approve something like that. There was questions about attachments being left off. They broke down. It was voted down by 73% of the union membership. I don't want individuals to think that the $450,000, you know the reasons why it was turned down. They had boxes in all 6 school buildings on the 14th of January. And they asked the teachers to put in the boxes, why did you vote against APPR? The number 1 reason, they didn't trust the superintendent, and they didn't trust administration. The morale in the district is really low. I warned you about this. I talked to you about the appeals process. It was a win-win for Mr. Akramovich, a lose-lose for teachers. Excuse me.
Negotiations, I think, should really.
This isn't negotiations. This is post-negotiation talk. This is a failed thing. Everywhere, everywhere I go, they ask me, we lost $450,000. The public needs to know the truth, because I've been to many, many things in this district, what many people have asked me, even in this audience. We lost $450,000. Why did this happen? I think the administration needs to take some ownership of this one.
I'm sorry, I intended for our statement to point that out, that this is indeed a negotiating process. This APPR is something that has to be between, as you say, the administration and the teachers union. And our wish is just that hopefully we can go forward. It's certainly very frustrating and too bad that those $450,000 were lost. But it would be devastating to the school district if in the future next year's $2 million would be lost. So my statement was only to say that we as a board hope that people can indeed come together at the negotiating table and work out this APPR and make sure that it's comfortable for everybody involved. And I know that already there was a huge amount of back and forth and a huge amount of work on the part of a lot of the teachers, a lot of the administration trying their hardest to come up with a plan that is acceptable. So I think our goal is just to say, let's go forward from here.
And I'm speaking out, but she's correct. Let's make those statements. I should have seen that statement before it came, because I should have some input as what the board.
I apologize, and I didn't think that that was a statement that had many things in it that were things that we needed to debate. But let's go on from here. Thank you very
No,
much.
and thank you for answering. I just thought that as a, this is just clarify how people on this conception, I think it's kind of nice so the public knows how, where the money, thank you.
Okay, to mention for people's scheduled future meetings coming up, we do have a budget work session on February 26th. We have another budget work session on March 5th. March 12th will be the next formal school board meeting. Can we have a report from some of our committees? How about our student first giving us an update in here? Get your speaker.
All right, so at the high school, the big thing that happened since the last board meeting was the musical, and it was great. All the students worked really hard on it, and it turned out really well and successful. The girls' basketball just won their big game last night, and I think that was for the division title. And the boys' basketball has their game tonight, and it's their senior night. And the band is going to Disney the week after February break to play in one of the parades in Disney. And then the Writers Guild is having a Valentine's Day fundraiser where they're selling chocolates and a poem. So that's what's happening at the high school.
Thank you.
Diane worked in the wiki about the outfield side, the crossing guard and Division Street.
Yes.
You want, here, you can go.
The Transportation Committee met, and we did have a couple of visitors with us, and we discussed some of the concerns that have been coming up, especially at Howfield. The crosswalk really is gone. And so with a little research, we were determining who was actually responsible to have the crosswalk actually put back in across from the high school to Howfield, and that's going to be the village. They're going to do that for us. They're going to actually help us with that in the summer when it gets warm, and they're going to redo the whole thing. But meanwhile, they're going to, in our next Good Weather Day, so go in and temporarily paint it so that at least there'll be something there, and we know it's not going to last. So if you see it and it wears off, we know that's going to happen, but we're going to replace it with a proper crosswalk, probably after school gets out or as their schedule permits. What else did we just, we talked about also the grant that, Safe Routes to School, that is a grant that we're not sure if it's going to be available in this upcoming fiscal year. We're hopeful, but we've already made a determination that we're going to start to work with the village collaboratively and prepare, looking in the event that that grant does become available, we will be making application with the village. In the meantime, we're starting to look at all of our different buildings and look at the safety of the signs and the walking for the kids who are walking to school, signage in the different schools, in the parking lots and all that. We're going to be working with the village directly and trying to get some improvements there.
Holly, you have anything from you on these buildings?
I don't, but you went to the health science, so you could go to that. But I do want safety committee, transportation committee. There are probably many parents out there that believe this is an issue that I believe the and I'm sure Dr. Cockins, you drive your son to school every day too. The situation at the middle school, if our committees can get together and talk about this. I mean, the buses are dropping the kids off after the warning bell. And at the same time, you have all the parents dropping their kids off. And that's fine, so you can wait in the line 20 minutes, but now the issue is that you have, parents are dropping their kids at McDonald's to avoid the line. And especially when there was snow, the kids are darting out to McDonald's and there's a crosswalk and parents. I actually witnessed, with all due respect, the principal of the school is now the crossing guard, and she jumped in front of a car. I mean, I'm not making this up. And I made plenty of calls, and the mayor's going to, if he's here, or somebody is getting called next, but this is an issue that I think as the safety committee and the transportation committee, go there in the morning at 10 to 8 and assess the situation, okay? Because I think that we need to do something as a board, and this is really important, and we need to do something pretty quick.
Well, detention's going to be pretty cool because Jen's beginning to give all those kids detention.
Oh, are you? Well, I got the letters.
I want to put this on the transportation agenda. I know that Ms. Giolella has done a lot of work here at the middle school folks, so maybe you can get Jen on the agenda and look at, how to resolve some of the issues. I know, Jen has taken some action based on our discussions to try to help alleviate it, but perhaps there's something more we can do.
I was told, and I do agree that this probably would alleviate quite a bit of trouble as if we would stop driving our kids every day and let them take the school bus like they're supposed to. That's what I was told. Okay, so yes, that would help. So if maybe half of us would take Mr. Giola's advice, that might help. You're okay? Thank you.
Yes, the Health Advisory Wellness Committee, we talked about the Community Drug and Alcohol Forum that was held on the 9th, looking at making that a district-wide policy. That it's mandated that parents come once every 3 years, like they do in Orchard Park and Frontier, to a drug forum as to what's out there, what the trends, the signs and symptoms. We've talked about this before. We talked about the Pertussis Flu, the Family Food and Fitness Fair on March 6th. We put on here at the Hamburg Middle School, right here. At this time, we're probably going to ask if the Josh Hayek, report on the Health Advisory and Wellness Committee. I also want to add one more thing too, that Sally Cousins and Doreen Morris, working with American Lung Association, it's a Cessation for Teens Smoking Program, and the Life Skills Program, which was temporarily put on hold for 1 year out of the budget. And that they're working on a program where students can earn up to 10 college credits in the healthcare field, which I think is really promising. We all know that healthcare is one of the few areas that are being hired in the area now. But is Josh here? Oh, there you are. So Josh is going to make a presentation for the committee. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Sally. Just a quick presentation. Hello, everyone. School board, thank you for having me just for a few moments. At our last meeting of the Health and Wellness Advisory Council that I sit on with a number of other, mainly district staff, professionals in that area, we voted unanimously to recommend that the suspension of life skills, the high school course, as a local mandate be lifted, and that it not remain as just an elective. There are many reasons that we recommended this, or we are recommending formally this at this time. First, the curriculum of life skills covers a vast majority of relevant skills that high school students need. I have the course outline should anyone be interested in taking a look, unless you've seen it already. I'll leave it here tonight with you. Secondly, and more specifically, one highlight of the curriculum is the CPR AED certification. It's a 2-year certification, as many of you know, but this would be something that every graduate of Hamburg High School would leave in their hands. They would have a 2-year certificate for CPR and AED, which, as we all know, is a very hot topic at this time. Thirdly, the course is a college credit course, which I had no idea until I looked through the curriculum and spoke with Doreen herself. It certainly makes parents happy and gives our students a head start to their higher education. And as we all know, it relieves a bit of stress on higher education costs for families. And lastly, I want to speak on my own behalf, just give you my opinion about this. As I thought about this course, and I thought about the real question that you have to ask yourselves as a board is, does this course merit having the word mandate next to it? And for me, it's a no-brainer. I think the answer is yes. The reality in this day and age, if someone told you that life skills, if I told my parents when they were growing up in the 60s that life skills was an actual course in high school, they would probably laugh, and I'm sure their parents would laugh, because it was basically the school of hard knocks, and mom and dad, who were around a lot, were able to teach you life skills. Well, it's just not the reality today. Obviously, we have single parents, we have families that have parents at different locations. We also obviously have families, whether they're intact or not, that have people that work busy schedules. So the skills in this course that I look at, and I think to myself, do our parents teach them? Absolutely they do. Do they have as much time as maybe in previous decades in this society? I don't think so. And so this is a supplement to what parents also do. The curriculum here is stuff that is so relevant to kids these days, hot topics, whether it's first aid CPR, but also things like traffic safety, texting while driving, things in this changing society that are really relevant to kids' lives. And it will certainly at least help them learn the skills. Obviously, they have to apply them in their everyday lives. But I thank you for your time. I just want to make sure that our council formally recommends that the suspension of life skills as a local mandate be lifted and that it be made a local mandate again. Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Traffic Safety Committee, and our meeting is coming up this Thursday. But Barb covered most of the topics that we're concerned about during the transportation presentation as far as safety around the school area. So the village is working with the Village Traffic Safety Committee as far as restriping and so forth and signage. And we're also working with the state to see what kind of grants are available, because as of the first of the year, New York State still didn't have any of their grants posted, so we're still watching for that and following. So as we learn more information, we will update the status of those programs. Thank you.
Some of us had the opportunity to go to our legislative school board breakfast this past Saturday. 3 or 4 of us were there. It was a very interesting meeting. A lot of our representatives and senators were there. For instance, Grisanti was there, Corbin was there. The concept was that it was a presentation given by school boards to these people so that we hopefully have extra messages going in to Albany to help out in terms of school relief. The 2 major topics that I think that were discussed, one was the concept of mandate relief. New York State has huge numbers of mandates that are placed upon school districts, and most of those mandates are unfunded mandates. So they tell us, a little bit like this APPR that we're discussing, that you're supposed to do this, but they don't give you any money with which to do it. So that has happened again and again and again, and I do believe that our elected representatives are trying to communicate that it's tricky for their to keep being mandates that are unfunded. One of the mandates that actually came up was the concept of the fact that our kids are supposed to be able to do testing online at some point down the road, 2014, I believe. And how in the world are we going to have all of our kids do testing online if we have to buy all the equipment to do that and we don't have any money to buy the equipment to do it? So that was one big emphasis. I think the other big emphasis was the issue of the money all being attached to competitions. So you're supposed to do Race to the Top to try to get this money. You're supposed to do something else to try to get this money. And this is money that a lot of the educators believe was money that was given to the schools, and the schools deserve to have it. And why do we keep having to have contests to get money to put carpets on our floor when we don't have money to keep our programs going, our roofs intact, our schools intact? So we are hoping that people will say, hey, look, it's your money, you can have it, and you there in the school districts are the ones who know best what to do with that money. So those are probably the 2 major messages that were discussed, and I think the other big thing was how much behind all of the different school districts are going to be in terms of this year's budget, and that's something we'll hear more about. A couple of other quick ones to mention. I didn't have the opportunity to go to the cardiac screening, but I heard it was a smashing success. We had about 150 kids show up to get EKGs and echoes and be seen and make sure that they don't have cardiologic problems that could get them into trouble in the future. It was a free service that was provided, and I think we're hoping to maybe try to get it done again later in the year, with the focus being to try to get middle school and high school kids involved. This was mostly elementary kids that showed up. Should I pass it on?
Just had the IDAs meet next week. Some businesses are applying for some tax breaks to come in and build and stuff that they're out of town. But there's no district facilities. We haven't met since the fall, I think. Yeah, could be.
I think we then are going to move on to some of our recognitions and presentations.
As Ellen indicated, we had, over the past couple weekends, some music productions in each of our schools, the middle school and the high school, and Ellen mentioned the Phantom at the high school, which was just a terrific production. This past weekend, the middle school had just another terrific production, The Beauty and the Beast, and at this time I'd like to call on Mike Gallagher to introduce our music folks from the high school, and just give a little recognition to them. Mike, if you would.
I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it, but it was phenomenal. The amount of time and energy that everybody put into the production really showed when they performed it Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. It was an incredible performance. It was a credit to the high school, a credit to the entire district and our whole community. But before I thank the person who's responsible for it, I wanted to really thank the person who's responsible for that person, giving him the freedom to be here and spend the late night. So if we could, Mrs. Ogie, if we can give her a nice round of applause. do know it's countless hours and many nights and obviously many disruptions to their family, but, you know, on behalf of the entire high school, thank you for letting us have Norm for those nights. I should say Mr. Zogay, we have students here, sorry. But at this time, if I could introduce Mr. Zogay so we can introduce everybody else, that'd be great. So,
I thought when you said the person responsible for this person, I thought my parents were going to walk in the room. I really, the thing that's made the show at the high school so successful over the past few years, and this year in particular, is I'm surrounded with a really, really, really great team. So I invited them to come here tonight. Over next to the water machine is Abby Wesley. She's the artistic director and the choreographer. And then the father-son team of Gary and Gary Smith, you know, like the junior and senior thing. So they transformed the stage into an opera house, into the Phantom's Lair, and into a ballroom all in one. So it was really, really awesome. So if you could give them a great thanks to the administration and to the Board of Education for supporting the program. And if everybody could acknowledge all of the students that are in the cast and crew and orchestra that showed up, if they could stand up, and then if you could give them a It was really great. I mean, parent volunteers. We probably had over 125 people involved in the production this year. I couldn't have been happier, and we had probably 2,500 people showed up all 3 nights. It was absolutely fantastic. So thanks to everybody for all your support.
Before you leave, just as part of our recognition that we've had from the district, we've used a marble apple to symbolize achievement and recognition for really terrific events and just your work that you do within the school district and the community. So on behalf of the district, we'd like you to present you with a marble apple, and obviously this is for everybody involved, but you're certainly the representative for it. So congratulations. Next, for the middle school's production of Beauty and the Beast, I'd like to introduce Jen Giolella, and she'll introduce.
I'll introduce the people who really matter for the musical, and that is Rhonda Peter and Jeanette Benson. They co-produce, co-direct, paint sets, do costumes, get everything organized, and keep lots of middle schoolers under control after school many days to produce Beauty and the Beast. So I will welcome them to the front of the room, and they can tell you who else they brought with them. Come on up, Rhonda.
Thank you. We brought with us Beauty and the Beast. Actually, Belle was played by Johanna Berg, and the Prince/Beast was played by Jonathan. I just went blank, Clausen. And I'm telling you what, they put in so many hours worth of work to put on this production. We are so proud of them, and we asked them to come tonight to represent the 92 kids in our cast. And so thanks for coming, and you guys just were amazing. We were just thrilled to work with you. And we just want to say thank you to the board and to Mr. Kramovich. Thank you so much for the support that we feel here in the district for our musical program. This is a lot of students at the middle school. We try to keep as many involved, actively involved as we can. It was, with the cast, with the crew and everybody, we had over 100 students involved, many parents. And for the first year ever, we actually did pay
a professional set designer and painter to come in and help us with our sets. So yes, we did help them paint and make costumes and everything, but also we had a lot of help. So thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it.
And I do want to mention that all of your performances were sold out. They were, so it was just terrific that, and I have to admit that I did come on Friday without a ticket, and I was able to scalp a ticket from somebody who couldn't attend, so yes. But congratulations, and thank you for your work, and we sincerely appreciate everything you do.
I'm on the agenda for the presentation, but it's really not me. Megan Mulbert is here to talk about the Family Food Fair coming up here at the middle school. And we have a student guest here who's going to talk about his healthy project, Christian Reinagel.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me this moment to share the news that we have our second Family Food and Fitness Fair here at the middle school. It's March 6th. It's from 6:30 to 8:30. Information is all over the web page. We are going to have about a dozen exhibitors here in this cafeteria, some food tasting. We're going to have 3 fitness opportunities, Zumba aerobics and line dancing. And then we're going to show some segments from The Way of the Nation, a very powerful documentary that was done recently. We invite the whole school community to come out. Even though it's at the middle school, we'd love to have anyone join us. In preparation for this awesome event, we have been doing a healthy food project with our 6th graders. It's been a lot of fun. The students are promoting a healthy food, researching it, and then they do a poster to advertise their food. And then some of the classes have been actually bringing in snacks to share with their classmates, which Christian did for the board today. And he is going to share with you a little bit about his food poster.
My name is Christian Reinagel, and for a project I did in the Healthy Foods project, I did the grapefruit. There are reasons why grapefruit is healthy, some interesting facts about grapefruit, why you should eat grapefruit, and some recipes for grapefruit. Here I put why grapefruit is healthy. Grapefruit is healthy because grapefruits are rich in vitamin C, and also they have compounds called bioflavonoids that help protect against infections. Some interesting facts about grapefruit. Grapefruit come in various colors, including pink, red, white, and golden. Grapefruit grows in clusters which look like large yellow grapes. That's why they're called grapefruits. In Australia, grapefruits are grown all year round. The grapefruits grow in warm climates only though. Why we should eat grapefruit? Grapefruit is delicious. Grapefruit contains a lot of dietary fiber, which is good for your body. Grapefruit is great for breakfast. And grapefruit is healthy and easily accessible all year round. I did 2 recipes. One was pink grapefruit pavlovas, and another is pink grapefruit and basil mojito mocktail.
Thank you. We could all have blue grapefruit now, but the board is going to get to enjoy some. The students have been really enjoying this project, and I love doing it. It's our 3rd year, and I hope to continue at events like we have on March 6th, 6:30 to 8:30. Hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We have a revised policy that we want to get a motion on. Is that okay, Steve? Should we go on to that before we have the budget discussions? Yes. Revised policy number 6431. Recommended motion for the approval to give the policy, which is concerning tutoring for pay. Can I have such a motion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, beyond that, the next step is a budget discussion.
Yes, we have information to present to the board today. The agenda will include the financial impact of the annual professional performance review of the executive budget proposal, and some initial expenditure and revenue projections for next year for the 2013-14 budget. And then a little bit of some discussion on the governor's pension reform proposal, which does carry some good benefits for the district in terms of a reduction in expenses. And so we'll take a look and show you what that pension reform means. Again, it's something that's been proposed by the governor. It's not something that's been accepted, but it gives us another alternative in terms of a way to look at our budget and keep our expenditures down. And then just looking at the 2013-14 budget process and future meetings. So I'm going to turn it over to Barb, and Barb will walk us through the information.
What did we lose and for what time period? As we've discussed and we've heard, we've lost approximately $450,000 in state aid that was budgeted for this fiscal year. That money is going to be taken out of our state aid payment, which we are slated to receive in March. And it's not a one-time loss in aid. Excuse me, it's not a one-time loss in aid. It's not something that you can recover. It's something that's now out of our base. How will we manage this cost? We're going to manage it the same way we look at any deficit or any gap in budgets. Even when we're working on our budgets for upcoming fiscal years, we always look at how are we going to manage the gap, the loss that we might have in between revenue and expenditures. And what we're going to do is look at a reduction in spending, utilizing district reserves and fund balance, or you can look at a combination of the above. And that is what we are really looking at. It's sort of a hybrid of reduction in spending and use of reserves and or fund balance. As employees, the budget is currently frozen. We freeze it every year basically to ensure that whatever needs to be purchased and the buildings is purchased as early as possible so that the buildings, the teachers, the students, they have what they need. And also that does help us because once the purchases are made, it provides a better snapshot for us of what we can project to be our expenses for the year and therefore our fund balance. Of course, if there are things that need to be purchased after the budget is frozen, we certainly do permit that. If it is critical to the district mission and or something that would impact safety for students or staff. Although it's not possible to recover our $450,000 by reducing spending, the only real way to potentially to reduce spending would be something in the way of a mid-year reduction in staffing. However, the superintendent and the board, as you've discussed, are not planning to do that at this time. So we will do what we can to limit our costs, but we know that we fully cannot recover the $450,000. Use of fund balance and reserves. The district plans to utilize unassigned fund balance and or reserve funds as needed to offset the loss of state aid. The way this really works is that you look at that at the end of your fiscal year, after you know what all of your expenses are, and you actually know what all of your revenues are. That's when you would actually make some moves from unassigned fund balance and reserve funds to cover the cost of that loss. I need another hand, sorry. Our current fund balance and reserves, this slide it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of a snapshot. This is what we have at this time. It's a little different than where we closed at the end of the year because of interest, but the interest is extremely minimal given interest rates at this time. Our first reserve is our debt service reserve, and a debt service reserve is basically monies left over from previous capital projects where you borrowed more money than you expended. And it's very common that you don't spend every money that you borrow in a capital project. And what's left over is actually in, it's called the debt service reserve. It's not in the general fund, it's kind of separate. And that is monies that need to be expended through the general fund for the use of only of making payments on debt service. In debt service, all it really is a fancy term for it's a loan payment, principal and or interest. So that's what we can use that money for. Our other reserve we have is our unemployment reserve. We have $224,223 in there at this time. At the end of 11-12, we had $24,000, so we were able to put a little bit of money into this reserve, and it is specifically to be used to offset the cost of unemployment. We also have an ERS reserve, an employees retirement system reserve. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to have a teacher's retirement system reserve. I couldn't tell you any good reason why, except it's just the way it is. We have $193,000 and change in this reserve, and the concept of putting money into this reserve was to prepare for escalating costs of contribution to the pension system. We also have an unassigned fund balance. It is actually a reserve, but it's generally just referred to as unassigned fund balance, or if you've been around a while, it used to be called unappropriated fund balance. It's the exact same thing. Basically, in its purest sense, is what we call our savings. It is money that at the end of the fiscal year was not allocated for a specific use. So it's there in the event that you have unanticipated expenditures and or an unanticipated loss of revenue. Because one thing you have to remember is when you prepare your budget and you're offsetting revenue budget, it is a projection. You don't really know what you're going to get in revenues until you've gotten them. It's really just your best guess. A little history about the way reserve fund works. School districts are permitted to carry a 4% unassigned fund balance. And if we had done that, we would have started this fiscal year with $2,263,918 in an unassigned fund balance. We did not do that. As you can see, we started with $778,282, which is about 1.4% unassigned fund balance. What I can tell you is that folks in my position strive to have a 4% fund balance. A lot of school districts do have that, or they maybe have a little bit less. I mean, it is starting to decline somewhat given the economic climate, but I can't say for certain, but I would say we probably do have one of the lowest unassigned fund balance in our area. If funds are utilized in 12-13, then it's just like at home. If you spend it now, you don't have it later. So whatever we have to utilize in 12-13 to make up for our revenue loss, it just isn't there in 13-14. Less unassigned fund balance may be available next year as a revenue if we need it. So basically, funding from the reserves and unassigned fund balance, will be used to offset the loss of revenue if at the end of the fiscal year we determine we need to make those moves. Oops. Oh, yeah, I reflected. I apologize. The 13-14 executive budget, the language in the governor's proposed budget does continue to link increases in state aid to compliance with the APPR. So basically, what we are understanding, if the governor's budget becomes law and this does not change, going forward, any of the increases in aid that would be due to us, either in foundation aid or in reimbursement aids, and I'll show you what I mean by that a little bit later in the presentation, we would just not be eligible for it. The proposal indicates that for 13-14, school districts have to have an approved and in place APPR by September 1st, 2013. This past year, our projected aid increase over the 2 fiscal years was that $450,000 that we've all discussed. The upcoming fiscal year, according to the executive budget state aid runs, our increase is approximately $2 million. So we don't have our APPR in place by September 1st, 2013, unless something changes in the interim. We do stand to lose that increase in aid also. As with our current fiscal year with 12-13, those funds, if they are lost, would not be recoverable. If you did a little quick math and you look back at our preceding reserves and fund balance line and you added them all up, which I did not do, but if you do, you would know that it does not add up to $2 million. So the money is not there to be taken from. This year we did have the opportunity to have more in reserves and in fund balance because the amount was $450,000. Next year, that money is less than the amount that we stand to lose. The 2013-14 budget is scheduled to be adopted by the Board of Education on April 16th. And as we said, the deadline for the approval of the APPR plan is September 1st. And we do have a responsibility to set forth before the Board of Education a responsible budget, a budget that where the expenditures and the revenues match, that we know what our anticipated revenues are going to be and what our planned for expenditures are. And what we know is that we cannot budget for more expenditure than we expect to receive in revenue. This slide talks about our, this is the executive budget proposal. There's a couple columns on here. What I've done is I've included what we budgeted for 12-13. That's the same thing that if you look back at the information when we were putting our budget together for last year, it's the same because it's budgeted. It's not the end of the year, so I don't have an actual for you on the slide. The next column is the governor's proposed budget. So if you wanted to go to division of budget or look at any of the state runs that were put out by the governor, the middle column reflects what he proposed, and the third column is what I call the governor's amended budget. It's kind of mine. I tweaked it a little bit based on what I thought we would actually receive. Basically, the governor's runs are based on a projection on what they think you're going to expend based on what you've budgeted. Now, I know that we are not going to expend everything that we've budgeted, so all of the reimbursement aids are probably not, or some of the reimbursement aids are not going to be as high as his projection. So in order to put together a conservative and realistic revenue budget, I always adjust it to something I think is most realistic. It's just a little bit safer. The first line is our foundation aid line, and you can see that the governor's budget is the same for 12-13 as it is for 13-14. That's true with all districts. Foundation aid is flat. There's a $0, 0% increase. The next three lines, BOCES aid, excess cost aid, and private excess cost aid, these are all reimbursement aids. Basically, that means whatever we spent last year, we're going to get reimbursement aid on this year and so forth. So these kind of aids go up and down, really just based on our expense from the preceding year. The BOCES aid, if you look, is one of the lines that I did adjust downward slightly, because based on the information BOCES provides us, I don't think our reimbursement is going to be quite what the governor is indicated. Hardware and technology, software, library, and textbook aid is all based on number of pupils, and it's $1 per pupil. So that fluctuates every year based on enrollment. It goes up and down a little bit based on how many incoming kindergartners you may have as opposed to how many kids are graduating or perhaps have moved out of the district. Transportation aid is also a reimbursement aid, and that's a projection based on what we think we're going to expend through the balance of the year. You can see I did highlight building aid, and this is where our big ticket increase is. Our difference between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, we're looking to receive about $1.6 million additional dollars, and that is strictly because we're halfway through our capital project. We've had several short-term borrowings, and the aid is starting to follow the debt. So this money is money that we need to pay our debt service payments or our loan payments with. These are dollars that the taxpayers voted on. They approved the project. They gave us authorization to go and borrow the money. We did that, and now we have to pay it back. And the state approved our project. The state has basically set aside in their budget how much they know that they have to provide to us based on our building aid ratio for our payments. And this is really the money that we stand to lose. A very large part of it is the money we stand to lose if APPR is not in place next year by September 1st to make these debt service payments. If you've read the newspaper perhaps or looked on the runs, it indicates that our increase in aid is 11%, or it's actually a little over 11%, and that is true. But what's interesting and what is not necessarily always explained is why it's 11%. And the reason it's so high is, now you all know, because of our great increase in building aid. If you happen to take that out of the equation, you would see our increase is significantly lower. The money that we can actually utilize. I think it's right around 4%. I don't have it in front of me. I have to look on the road. So.
On the site, what would our increase be? I know it's 11.5 the report.
In dollars?
11.5%. How much percent increase are we getting this year from the state? Without talking about the
About the building aid, like I don't have it with me. It's a little, I think it's a little over 4%. I did the math.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give that to us.
Sure, I can look. I have it. I just I did my stuff for you. So anyway, aid is very complicated, and it's not quite as simple as it seems. A lot of times, if you take a quick look at what's being reported, if you don't look into it a little more thoroughly, you'll find that it's just a little harder to explain than perhaps time is given to it. The executive budget proposal includes $610 million in increased school aid, $203 million in fiscal stabilization funding, and this is in recognition of an extraordinary increase in school district fixed costs, especially pension growth. So there was a little bit more money allocated this year to fiscal stabilization because of those increases in pension growth, although there is no distribution information at this time. New York education reform initiatives take up about $75 billion, and you can see if you look on the slide, there's a laundry list of things that would include. One of the more interesting and favorable aspects, at least in our opinion, regarding the executive budget proposal is the pension reform. There is included in his proposal is a stable rate pension contribution option, which you have to opt into. From what we know, you opt in for 25 years. There's not complete information available on this yet, but the way it looks is that the TRS rate, instead of fluctuating every year, and it does seemingly go up every year, this year it's going from 11.84 to 16.5%, would be stabilized at 12.5% over the next 25 years. And the ERS rate would stabilize at 12%, and this year it would otherwise be going up to 20.9%. So this is something that we're very interested in, both in the long-term and short-term and the long-term perspective. It certainly would help our budget immensely, and I will get to that on the next slide. We have some numbers that we can present to you. The executive budget, again, also reiterated the APPR plan needing to be in place by September 1st, and also included a special education waiver process allowing districts to request flexibility from special education requirements to the state education department. The pension form proposal shows you on this slide that currently the projected 13-14 contribution For TRS, it's 16.5%, is in excess of $3.5 million. That's what we have to pay into the retirement system for our teachers' pension costs. If we were to opt into the pension contribution option, stabilizing our rate at 12.5%, we realize a savings of about $863,000. So that's very significant. ERS, the 20.9% rate yields about a $1.5 million bill. If we were to opt in, we would see a savings of over $600,000. So these are estimates, but we're looking at probably saving in the neighborhood of $1.5 million between the TRS and the ERS pension stabilization option, if that actually does become law.
Over what time period?
For next fiscal year.
Wow.
Our 13 and 14 budget outlook, once again, we have a gap, and that is something that we'll be discussing in future meetings when we look a little more closely at all of our budgeting. So obviously we have a gap. The district has limited reserves and limited fund balance to close the gap, just like many other school districts. We have made significant expenditure reductions over the last 3 years, which have impacted program and staff. Additional reductions beyond level 1, which are enrollment-driven reductions, we are hopeful that they are to be limited. Of course, a lot of that is yet to be determined. It's still early in the process. The 13-14 budget has significant expenditure increases. Just like most school districts, our biggest part of our budget, 70% of our budget, is staff. By staff, I mean that's payroll and all of the benefits associated with payroll, pension cost, health insurance costs, our share of the employees' FICA and such. A very large part of our budget it's about 70% of our budget is basically related to employee cost. Other expenses, though, that we are dealing with, there's the increase in health insurance, the increase in the pensions, special education costs. I don't want to say they're always rising, but it's just something that we have a difficult time controlling. Our obligation is to the student to have them properly placed. Once that determination is made, we do our best to try to place them in a manner where we can contain cost, but that becomes a very difficult process. So special education is something that we always know could considerably go up. Students can move into your district. Those are just things that are very difficult to control. Our debt service is also going up because of our process of how far we are into our capital project budget. But likewise, you did see that the revenue is also following the expenditure for the debt service. Our other expenditure increases include things like transportation, BOCES, and utilities. Expenditure and revenue trends. This slide goes back to fiscal year 07-08 through our current fiscal year 12-13. And it's just interesting. It's a historical snapshot. It shows you our budget-to-budget increase over the years, our tax levy increase over the years, the total revenues and fund balance that each year closed out at, actual state aid received, with the exception of this year, because the year is not over, so what I put in the actual state aid column for 12-13 is actually our budgeted amount. I won't be able to tell you what that is until sometime probably in July. And then the last column is really kind of interesting, is our federal stimulus funding. And you can see that we had a significant loss in federal stimulus funding monies that were extremely helpful in the years 09-10 up and through 2011-12. Fund balance and reserve trends is the next slide. And what I'm saying in this slide is it represents our starting balance for each year. So this is the amount of money that we're going into a year with. Or if you want to think about it, the preceding years, what we ended with. But this slide represents it as the starting point. So you can see our debt service reserve has been pretty stable because our capital project concluded prior to 09-10, so that number really hasn't changed much. Our ERS reserve was non-existent until the end of 11-12, so we went into fiscal year 2012-13 with $193,000. Our unemployment reserve has fluctuated over the years based on economic needs and obviously reduction in staff. Right now we have $224,052 in our unemployment reserve. Unassigned fund balance has fluctuated over the years too. We had one year that was significantly higher than the rest, 2010-11, but otherwise we're holding at somewhere around between $700,000 and $750,000. You can see on the 13-14 column, it's a projection, and it is really early to try to project fund balance, because fund balance is a combination of, at the end of the fiscal year, what you budgeted to spend and didn't, and what you thought you were going to get in reserves and did or didn't get. So and I know that sounds kind of convoluted, but basically, you have a budget, you don't spend all of it, you have money left over. You budget for a certain amount of dollars, you get more or less, and then you add those two together, and that's what you get in the end, is what's left is your fund balance. So it's kind of hard to project in each year, if you guys followed that. But basically, I know that we're going to be taking probably that $450,000 out of fund balance. So for simplicity, I just showed that as declining in 13-14. It may change, it may not be that bad. It's hard to say this early. Our assigned fund balance is the amount of money that we've used historically to reduce the real property tax levy. And this past year, we reduced it to $750,000, and my hope is that we'll be able to keep it at that level going into 13-14. Encumbrances don't really mean anything to people, except that if I didn't put encumbrances into this slide, my numbers didn't balance, and as a bean counter, I couldn't have that. So encumbrances, all they really are is when you move from one fiscal year to the next, it's money that you have outstanding in bills. So if we ordered something on June 15th, and I knew that it was from that fiscal year because the fiscal year ends on June 30th, but I'm not going to pay it until July 10th because I'm not going to get the product in and I'm not going to be able to pay the bill. I have to encumber the money and move that forward because it's really an expense in the previous year. So that's reflected in this slide. Not that it's a real reserve that we can draw money from, but like I said, if I didn't put it in the slide, if you decided to add up my numbers, you would find they didn't add up. And also, if you want to add up my numbers, you will find that the debt service reserve line, it does not add in. It is not in that total because the debt service reserve is in its own special little place, and it's not allowed into the general fund. But I wanted to show you on the slide how much money was in that reserve. Revenue trends. This is an interesting feature. Since 2009-10, we've lost almost $9 million in federal stimulus monies. So that was a huge infusion into our budget, and it really allowed us to weather the storm of reduced state aid, because we had, even though we were losing state aid, we were getting stimulus monies that sort of offset it. So those monies are gone. They finished out last year. It's just an interesting feature to see how much money we've actually lost. Fund balance and reserves. This is sort of a summary of the other slides. You can see that we generally used to appropriate $1.7 million in fund balance to offset the real property tax levy in 12-13, and hopefully in 13-14 that number should be $750,000. And currently there's a total of $706,209 combined in our unemployment, employee retirement system, and debt service reserves. Over the last few years, or several years, there's been very little surplus to build into the budget. those days where there were huge fund balances and a lot of money built in the expenditure budget that was not expended is just over. It's over for us and it's over for all districts. With only $778,000 in change in unassigned fund balance, it's very difficult to increase our allocation to reduce the tax levy. Total proposed aid to education. No, I skipped my own slide, I apologize. This is the revenue projection slide. It's an initial draft. As I said, a revenue budget is a projection. It's your best guess based on historical information and information that you're provided by the state. So if we were to have a rollover budget, this would be the numbers, the way the numbers would flow. First, what we do is we take a look at all of the things that we think we're going to get: sales tax, interest income, local revenues, state aid. We just take out pre-K because that goes into the federal fund, and other areas. We get a total, and then basically it's really simple. You add all that up, and then you look at your budget, which a rollover budget for us is $61,593,000. You just take out all your revenue you think you're going to get. You look at your expenditure budget. You subtract off all your revenue, and the money you're short is your tax levy. That's like the down and dirty way of thinking it. It's just your levy is basically whatever you're missing in revenue to make up for all the money you need to support your expenditure budget. So if we were to have a rollover budget, which would be with keeping all the staffing the same and having everybody move up, and with no changes to program or staffing, our projected rollover budget is the $61,593,000. And with that, you would have the resulting property tax levy. And as I indicated, we'll be talking more about that in later budget meetings. Our state aid to Hamburg, proposed aid to education is $889 billion, including the fiscal stabilization funding and the New York education reform initiatives. The state aid increase to Hamburg is 3.71%. I knew it was very close to 4% without building aid. So if you look at it with building aid, it's a little bit over 11%. And without the building aid, it's slightly under 4% at 3.71%, based on the governor's proposed budget. And that can change, of course, because this budget has not been put into place yet. Increases in school aid are going to be tied to state growth and state growth in personal income. Competitive grants, there's $280 million allocated for competitive grants. It's one of the ways the governor is trying to spend additional monies. Unfortunately for us, a lot of those grants are tied to income and wealth, and that is measured by our free and reduced lunch status. And Hamburg is not eligible for many of the competitive grants just because our free and reduced lunch status is not, we don't have enough participants. Something like about 17% is all we have in free and reduced lunch. So it's very difficult to be eligible for many of the monies that you hear about. Gap elimination adjustment, the state aid reduction over the past 4 years has been accomplished by freezing certain aids and funding expenditure aids by formula and implementing what's become known in the business as the gap elimination adjustment, or the GEA, which takes a calculated amount of aid from districts. Basically, the GEA takes funds and redistributes these funds to higher need districts. Our GEA for 13-14 is $3.2 million. So basically, on that one slide where I indicated all the different aids and from the governor's proposed run, on the bottom was the GEA for 13-14. And basically, all they do is tell you all the aid we're going to give you, and then this is the number of aid, this is what we're going to take back. You're never really going to see it. So they sort of subtract it off the bottom. The good news is that they're taking away less aid this year than they took away last year, supposedly. So, and that was used as a factor in determining how much increase in state aid was going to all school districts statewide, that they were going to take back less money than they took back last year. How could we have a presentation if we didn't at least show a couple slides on the tax levy limitation? Basically, the tax levy limitation, and we're just going to talk briefly about it, is accomplished by determining the tax levy limit and adding on top of that coming school year exemptions. And then you do have a number called your maximum allowed tax levy. And that is the amount that you are allowed to levy and only require a simple majority, 50% plus 1, is to vote yes for the budget. Our initial tax levy limit calculation, and this is probably pretty close to being completed. It's due in March to the state. It might change a little bit, but I think it's probably pretty close. The calculation basically is very complicated and it's different for every school district. Everybody goes through the same calculation, but by no means is every school district's levy limitation the same, and most of them are never 2%. So that's kind of a misnomer. If you go through this calculation, basically you start with our current year levy and you add in what's considered the tax-based growth factor, which is provided to us by the state. Then you need to add into that the amount of money that we took in pilots, which are basically payments in property tax, and certain businesses work with the IDA to be eligible for a pilot, and they don't pay tax, but they make payments. So they're not here for free, but their payments are different, and so they're outside of the levy, and this way we have to add them back in. So you add them in and you subtract off your current year exemptions, and I'll show you that on the next slide, and then you get what's called your adjusted current year levy. You multiply that times that 2%, this is the only place you ever see the 2%, to determine what your adjusted your levy is plus 2%. You have to subtract off now your upcoming year pilots because you can't double count them because that would be cheating. And then you get your tax levy limit. And like I said, every school district does this calculation, and every school district's tax levy limit, dollar amount, and percentage increase is going to be completely different. One of the things you're allowed to do is there are certain exclusions to the levy limitation based on excessive costs that we can't control, and that would include pensions. And if there is an increase in pension from one year to the next, in excess of 2%, you're allowed to exclude that amount of money in excess of 2%. This year, the teachers' retirement system is going to have an increase in excess of 2%. So we are allowed to exclude a certain dollar amount. Our dollar amount is $519,000. So we get to add that back on to our total levy limit for our total levy limitation of $32,375,924. And that is the amount of money we can levy by only needing a simple majority of the votes. If we wish to exceed that amount, we have to have what's called a supermajority, and you have to have at least 60% of the voters vote yes to come and vote that day for the budget. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't click ahead. I was talking and I apologize. Our capital tax levy exclusion last year, we had one because our building aid was less than our debt service. And if you recollect when we talk about that, if your building aid is less than your debt service payments, you're allowed to take that difference and ask the taxpayers to pay it. And so it's excluded from the levy limitation, and we were allowed to add that back on. This year, we don't have any capital project or debt service exclusion because our aid is now really starting to flow, which also explains why we're getting more aid this year than we did last year. So that makes good sense. It's actually one of those things when it comes full circle, you can see that it actually works. We don't have an exemption because now we're getting more aid. Last year, we didn't get enough aid to pay our debt service, so we had an exemption. So this year, we do not have a debt service exclusion to add on to the total.
last slide. And this slide is just, it indicates all of our upcoming budget development meetings. So if you're interested in learning more about the budget, because it's very complicated, yet interesting concept, I encourage you to attend our special budget meetings as indicated, and of course under you're also going to see our regular board meetings. Thank you.
I do just have one question. Now this, last year, and this is obviously, and we're getting close to budget time, I feel like we're behind the eight ball, but you're talking, okay, so last year when we adopted our budget, our fund balance unappropriated or unassigned was projected to be 770-some thousand. Now, was that before the 450?
No, last year, you gave
I can't read, I don't have the exact numbers.
No, it was-
So this is after, we don't get
This
the,
actually,
okay.
I didn't, we had not, I don't speak about that.
Correct, and I mean, there's other savings that we've realized that we didn't, you know, so it's, but, so this is after?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you. Just some of the warnings about the pension fund. The Bloomberg report has some warnings about how we're just bankrupting our future. I think we're going to look at it real carefully. I know it's a quick savings, but as the mayor in Syracuse, who's an ally and a good friend of the governor's, she's now mayor of Syracuse. She's a big education reformer. She worries about this also, about the next generation. That we do have to pay all this back. You're borrowing from the pension fund, you're borrowing, and you're going to have to pay it back with interest. So we better look at it. They got quite a bit of things off the internet on it. We have to look really carefully at that if we proceed with that. The other thing too is a new board member. When do we have a chance as board members to say what we would like in the budget, not like in the budget?
Well, I think as we go through our budget workshops, that's your opportunity to take a look at that.
Okay.
Take a look at, you know, the gap of revenue and expenditures and strategies to, you know, reduce or enhance that.
Okay, another real important component, we have to look at providing and paying for a curriculum for this APPR to be successful, for our teachers to be able to evaluate them in a uniform way fairly. Without a curriculum, as I've gone through this whole race to the top APPR component, without a curriculum, it's really difficult to evaluate anyone.
Absolutely.
You have to be on the same page at the same time, all the schools, and even in the same building. So that's going to be included in the budget. And I know we have a vice principal who's part-time curriculum development coordinator. She's going to have to come on board with this.
And we can talk about that at budget, because I think this is part of, you know, even last year when I was saying, oh my gosh, you're allocating more money to administration, but might be something that we have to look at in our budget time.
I think as we talk about this, I know that there are committees right now, groups of teachers and some of our principals who are working very hard on those curriculums. And there's been a huge investment on the part of teachers in terms of meeting together, working on developing the curriculum. So that is something that, thank goodness, everybody's already working together on. We're working quite hard on.
We will be piloting Math Series, take a look at for purchase for 2013-14. That's currently becoming active. We are also looking at the resources necessary for ELA. Our focus is mainly on the elementary levels at this point, but we're certainly not ignoring the secondary levels.
We're going on to the report card.
Yes, we have Colleen Kane present and this is an action item H5 that you'll see later on in the agenda, but Colleen's going to present a report card update.
Good evening. I think I can speak louder than several of you here, if that's all right. I'm joined this evening with Erin Laughlin. She's a member of our report card committee as well as a 5th grade teacher at Armour. And we're actually very thankful and excited to be here this evening to be able to talk about the elementary trimester proposal. You have received a detailed memo that the report card committee put together. And our job tonight is to actually just give a brief overview of that and give you a deeper understanding of what that proposal actually means. First and foremost, we want to take some time to thank our committee members. And they have been working tirelessly since actually 2009. When I look at this list, a lot of them have been on the committee since 2009. We're happy to have a parent join us this year. Kevin Summers has been our parent and has been a great ally between our committee and the PTSA. So a real quick history of where this elementary report card committee started. In 2008-09, we really decided as an elementary team that we needed to form a report card committee as well as an advisory committee. We needed to get representatives from the Board of Education, parents, all instructional areas, administrators. We needed to come together and have a conversation about what to do with our report cards so we would better report information to parents. After some long years of research, we were able to come up with a new report card in the 10-11 school year and roll that out. This committee did not stop once it created the new report card. It continued to do further research and try to address some of the concerns that came with the new report card, which brings us to the discussion tonight of quarterly versus trimester report cards. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
Hey, thank you. And I do want to mention that Colleen was on the original committee when she was still in her role as a teacher. So that's how long we've been working on this, and so we appreciate the forum to have this discussion. The first thing we want to do tonight is talk about the difference between the quarterly and the trimester report card approach. In the quarterly format, which we use now, we have 48 days in the first quarter, 39 in the second, 48 in the third, and 39 in the fourth. And even though it doesn't seem like that's a huge disparity between those numbers, in that second quarter, when we only have 39 days, we also have Thanksgiving and Christmas involved in there. And Christmas in an elementary school is not smooth. We cannot appreciate that. It takes us a lot of work and efforts to make sure that we're providing growth opportunities, but also letting the kids enjoy their time with the holiday. So it really cuts down on that second quarter reporting. In the third quarter, we have February break, spring break, and our 2 weeks of state testing involved in there. So really, our opportunities for growth are kind of interrupted by a lot of the things that are just naturally happening on our calendar. So our proposal, is there a slide with the numbers on?
There is.
Okay. So our proposal is that we switch to a trimester approach and only have 3 report card times where we're reporting. And we can actually use the calendar to split it into 61 days 3 times. So it'll be 61, 61, 61. But actually, when you do put those numbers together, it hits at the 10-week mark, the 25-week mark, and the 40-week mark. So even though it's a trimester, it really is shifting the reporting to parents to a time where the dates are more evenly distributed and allowing the kids to have more time for growth. A lot of times we get stuck in the cycle of assess and report and assess and report, but we're not allowing ourselves the time to actually have the kids show their growth before we assess them again. In the fourth quarter, that end of the year crunch is always very busy, as in the high school and the middle school, but especially in elementary school, we try to use those end of year activities to front load the next school year, especially the fact that we don't have a summer school program anymore. We have to get that in there, Rally, by chance. The end of the year time has typically been spent front loading for the next school year so that our strugglers are using that time to continue to grow rather than just go through more and more assessments. So those are some of the highlights from there. Was there anything to add on that piece? Okay. And so some of the advantages is that, well, the big advantage is that it allows student growth to take place at a higher frequency. And rather than spending that time saying, well, we're getting away with not doing an extra report card, our goal is to implement a spring conference with the parents, just to keep that communication line going. And so if we see them in the fall and the spring and have 3 report cards, and it's also typical in the elementary schools that you are constantly progress monitoring and communicating with parents. It's a natural component of elementary school, so we don't feel like that's a reduction of any kind of communication either. Let's see, more instructional time. Common Core wants us to be focusing more on mastery rather than exposure. And in order to do that, we need more time to just be with the kids rather than a lot of the paperwork that's associated with preparing reports for parents. Let's see, I'm thinking that's...
Just some other topics that we're continuing to discuss with the report card committee is we are talking about how we inform parents and keep parents informed as we make this potential change, how we align the report cards to the Common Core. We are looking to have a meeting on the 28th with all the staff members so that we can have a conversation and get their input about making sure that our report card moves in that direction to be aligned with the Common Core. Certainly taking into account special education and AIS, they would still report quarterly. That's a state state actually regulations that we have to follow. And then just making sure that we actually update the community as well, so they know why we're doing a potential trimester report card instead of a quarterly report card. So what does our timeline look like? Here we are tonight presenting to the board of our trimester proposal. If it's approved, we will continue to discuss with staff, like we talked about, align report cards to the Common Core. That will happen during the winter and spring of 2013. We'll share that revised report card and get feedback from staff. We also will share this information with the PTSA. We believe it's very important to make sure we have parents on board so they understand what's happening. Look to get some information into the focus. And continuous communication not only in the spring of 2013, but also in the fall of 2013 when the actual trimester will take place. And then we will continue to revisit this and make any changes as necessary if it is approved tonight. But we're certainly here for any questions that you may have about the trimester report card.
I would just like to add something. The parent representative for the PTSA, few of the board members attended the last meeting, and he did a wonderful job explaining this whole process to the PTSA. And the vice presidents from all the buildings were there, as well as the state executive board. So they've heard a little bit about it so far, but it'll be nice for you to present as well.
Any other questions?
The other thing I think that I heard perhaps at that PTSA meeting, but also subsequently, is how much time it takes the teachers to do this new report card, which is an extremely, very, very helpful report card for parents to look at to understand how their kids are doing. But for each kid's report card takes an immense amount of time, so that if we have one less report card that those teachers need to do, that will be time saving. Anybody else?
My only question, in going through the material that you gave us, there's still going to be the 10-week reporting for AIS students. My concern would be how about the general students that aren't AIS but are marginal, and how is a parent going to be aware that maybe they need a little additional support?
I think it's a great question, and I think the expectation is still there that whether they're a kindergarten student or a senior, if there's concerns, then we need to reach out as the staff and we need to address that with the parents. So that certainly would be a discussion that we're moving to the free report card. We are adding an additional conference, but we know as educators if there's concerns, we need to be proactive and have that conversation, and that would certainly be the expectation. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Erin, as well.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, Steve, there are a few other information to the board. Let's go to, okay.
Regarding administrative follow-up and communication with community members regarding public comments. I know Sally, you asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yes, in our December meeting, a gentleman came up, Mr. Ted Fancher.
Yes.
Microphone.
Can't hear you. Yeah, can't hear you.
At our board retreat, we talked about, people address the board, getting back with them. And I bumped into Mr. Ted Fancher. He was on Janice Place at the Benno the Opera. And he approached me and said, the superintendent got back with him. He came here on December 11th. He was not here. He said he lived in the district for 62 years and asked you about this particular situation with the swimming. So I'm asking you at this time, please get back with Mr. Ted Fancher and anyone who addresses the board, give them courtesy whether you give an affirmative answer or a negative answer. They deserve respect to be gotten back with.
When I talk with Dr. Calkins about this, we'll also update the board in terms of that communication going back to the...
I think that's what you should do.
Okay.
And all communication that come into the district, thank yous, no thank yous, with concern, I think the board should be copied on all that also.
You do get those.
Okay,
All of
thank
that
you.
information is included in your board packet.
So I appreciate your contact.
Quick note on that one, I did recently speak with Wendy Ryan about the swim program and talk with her about the limits in terms of the numbers of people swimming. So she's working on that. And one of the problems is that they do have a set number of people that are allowed in the pool, and as we do know that that's very, very well attended by our seniors. So she is also focusing on trying to figure out how she can be able to extend the numbers. Okay, moving on from there, we have update in terms of regarding the filing of the transportation contracts and the 1.3 million units of transportation aid. Second, Barb, 1 second.
Districts were encouraged by the end of December to submit a letter requesting aid be paid or be considered to be eligible for aid and not have aid taken back. If the reason that transportation contracts were not filed on time or were not being able to be accounted for was due to what was considered a clerical oversight, it was interesting that this opportunity did present itself to all the districts. And so we did file a letter in December before Christmas explaining our situation and asking that we be considered eligible for the aid and therefore not subject to any future takebacks. So we have not had a response to what he has at this point, to my understanding. And when we do get some information regarding that, we'll be happy to be very to share that.
We asked the governor, two separate administrations, actually three, two different governors, if we would get this money. And Governor Cuomo said there's no way. This district and this one other district, we're not getting reimbursed for that 1.3. So where is this coming from?
Well, that's the money that I'm speaking about.
Yes.
We already received the money. Okay, so it's not about not getting it, it would be about them wanting to take it back in some sort of format. And the way they would probably do that was they would implement upon us some sort of repayment plan, and they would just take it out of our current state aid. And we, from my understanding, when I looked at historical documents, show that there was legislation, forgiveness legislation that had been, it was either 2 or 3 times that was proceeded with, and each time was told no, no, no. And years, not that many years ago, if there was an error like this, which was clerical or generally considered clerical in nature, forgiveness legislation was pretty easily put into place, and you either got to keep your aid or you did get your aid. So this is something new. At this time, that is what the governor has said. We have not received any new communication that, from his perspective, that there would be any change. However, this is not through the governor's office. This is through this would be through SED, through state aid. Basically, they're looking through the Division of Budget, I believe, as a measure to, because the money's already been budgeted for, to keep that aid flowing. So we haven't heard anything yet. They did not indicate any type of timeline or response, but we are hopeful. We haven't received any bad news.
That was in my discussions with Senator Kennedy last year before Grisani, your district did. Senator Kennedy's office was working through Division of Budget because the money was budgeted for that in this year's budget. So they were hopeful that that would go through this year, and unfortunately it hasn't. But again, I think the opportunity is still there because of the request for submission. So that is, in their hands at this point, so we're hopeful that we won't have any take back of that money. I think related to that was F7 clarification on the reference to the controller's audit of 2008.
Yes, it was.
Okay, Barb, can you address that?
Sure. I found the audit and I am in the process of reviewing it. I would expect that part of the audit that they did cover the loss of the transportation aid is in the comments. They're probably considering more about process. But I haven't had an opportunity to completely review it in depth to see if there was anything additional that should be reported to the board regarding that. But I would expect that that was certainly part of the audit.
I'll tell you what was at the end of the audit. The end of the audit, way back.
Barb, can you just help?
At the end of the audit, when Dr. Crawford responded that we were going to have absolute transparency in this district with the affairs of the district, that this doesn't happen again. So I just want to have it as a reminder that we want complete transparency on everything we do in this district, because that's what he promised the state controller.
All right, still go.
Moving on, we have some consensus items. Recommended motion that approval be given to all consensus items under section G. Before I get that motion, let me just quickly go through that. That's the minutes. Approval to some personnel items, unpaid internship, coaching assignments, and things like that. Adoption of a new textbook, health textbook. Some surplus items that are being surplused, wood lathes, some approval of some athletics supplies, middle school, some equipment, field trips to Legal, field trip to the Hamburg Middle School to the Science of Olympiad, Boston Valley to the Mud Drive Conservatory, preschool education committee recommendations. Those are basically the sorts of things that we're approving in terms of the consensus items. Can I have a motion? Can I second the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on from that. We then have action items. We'll go through each of these individually. The first is a warrant. I recommend a motion that warrant number 6 for December 2012, totaling $6,265,116.22 for the general fund, the federal fund, the school lunch fund, the trusted agency warrant, and the capital fund be approved. Can I have a motion? A second? All in favor? Opposed? We then have we have treasurer's reports. Recommended motion that the treasurer's report for December 2012 be approved. A second? All in favor? Opposed? We have a recommended motion that the extra classroom activities accounts be approved for all buildings for December 2012. A second? All in favor? Opposed? We have a recommended motion that the board nominates Raymond L. Carr residing at 112 Nantucket Drive, Cheektowaga, which is located in Cheektowaga Central School District, and Andrew Loeb residing at 4079 Knoll Drive in Hamburg, which is located in the Hamburg Central School District, and Wayne Schlifke residing at 11585 Westwood Road, Alden, which is located in the Alden Central School District, as candidates for the election to be held on April 16th of 2013 to serve as trustees for the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, First Supervisory District of Erie County, in a term beginning July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2016. A second? All in favor? Opposed? We then have the recommended motion concerning the trimester report card. A recommended motion that the Board of Education of the Hamburg Central School District hereby approve of the adoption of the trimester report card system effective the 2013-2014 school year. Second? All in favor? Opposed? Sally, do you want to read the next resolution?
Whereas on 1/11/13, 73% of the Hamburg Teachers Association, HTA members, voted down the Hamburg Central School District's APPR plan. I voted 217 against and 82 for. And whereas the good for our students, our teachers, school district employees, and the community, the HTA would like to address the Hamburg Central School Board regarding the events that transpired in the breakdown of these negotiations between the superintendent, administration, and the HTA. Whereas HTA is deserving of an opportunity to correct all misinformation surrounding APPR negotiation discussions, be resolved that the Hamburg Central School District shall schedule and hold a special work session on Tuesday, February 19th at 6:30 p.m. in the Administration Building. Be it further resolved that the HTA leadership, including the contract committee and all officers of the HTA, shall be invited to participate in the work session and provide their account of the events that led to the HTA voting down APPR by such a large margin. Be it further resolved that the public deserves an answer as to why the district may lose $450,000 due to not passing the APPR proposal. I so move.
Second.
On the question that, I think you can hear me, everyone? On the question, there's a lot of questions out in the community, and as I said earlier, I've been approached by many people as to why did you lose $450,000? What happened? I think the teachers are getting a bad rap. But it's not they don't want to be evaluated, they have serious issues, and I think the board needs to know if we're to go forward. As we said, we stand to lose $2 million. I think we should give them an opportunity to explain to all of us sitting here, because eventually we do vote on all this, but the superintendent on this contract. So I think they're deserving of an opportunity to express their views to the board as to what happens.
On the question, I'm just gonna ask, and I do, I think as a board, we do need a resolution, except that, as a board, I don't know that we can, and I know this is not, I'm not gonna make anyone happy by saying this. However, as a board, I think, we can let the negotiations be to the negotiating parties, and then us as a board needs to really have a serious discussion and say, we might have to say, let's ask the state what they're going to do. If indeed there is not an agreement reached, which I'm not going to negotiate either side, but what's going to happen in New York City? And there has to be talk about this. I mean, there really does. And as a board, we represent the taxpayers, and this is and the
brought that
students.
question up at the legislative breakfast, and the assemblymen and the senators could not answer it. But they believe that the state will, they couldn't say for sure, but they believe that then you will be evaluated by the state's APPR plan.
Correct.
But they couldn't confirm it.
Right, but, we as a board do have to go forward. And I know the HCA has great, I'm sure, they have a lot, a lot to talk about on what their, but the time frame too, it's on a time that the school's off and people aren't here on the 19th. School's not in session, so we could call a special meeting, if you feel that a special meeting needs to be called to discuss it. But I think that we need to, us as a board, need to have some serious, dialogue. And I know this is not something that Mr. Abramovich would want me to say, or the administrators, and this is not something that the teachers want me to say. But the bottom line is that we may need to, start lobbying the state ourselves.
But you're saying, get the state to give us an APPR if we can't come up with our own? That's
As
what
a
you're
board,
saying?
yes, I think that we have to. We represent the taxpayers of Hamburg and the students.
I'm going to add this. I think there's nothing better than the truth. There's nothing better than the truth. The truth is, let them explain their rationale as to why this went down. We're not in negotiations right now. This is post. This is something that's failed. Why did this fail? I think that we need to hear as a board why it failed. Give them the opportunity, because you know what? They're a very unhappy group right now.
I would disagree that we're not in negotiations. I'd say it's more of a bit of a cooling down in negotiations. This is still an agreement that needs to be met. So I disagree that this is post. It's post a vote, but it's not post negotiations, because those will still be going on. I think that the right way to do this is to, we understand that there's obviously some issues that need to be addressed. I think we're going to address those through whatever means we feel we as a board can do. But I think trying to look back and try to dissect what happened is not going to be productive towards coming to an agreement in the future, and I'm afraid that it's just going to continue to drive a wedge between administration. I think it'll drive a wedge between administration and the board and the union and the teachers. And I think that we need to, I think taking a step back is a good thing, and I think we need to look forward. As we said, we feel that we should have an agreement not by September 1st, but by mid to end April, when we approve the budget, that we know that we have an APPR plan in place. I understand that there's a lot of issues at stake. One of which is even the ideology of whether this is the proper way to educate our kids. And that's a very good argument to have. I just don't think that this is the way really to voice those concerns. There's ways to do that. There's going to lobby Albany and all that, but using this is the wrong way to do that.
Can we, on your resolution, can we maybe, I mean, we're having our budget work session, I believe, in 2 weeks, correct?
Correct.
And, as public meetings, and I know generally the public's not allowed to speak at budget work sessions, they can sign in to speak, but there's, if the HTA wanted to present or to give their point, there's no reason that we couldn't start at the public session if Mr. Morozek wanted to address the board, because it does. I mean, if you have any quorum, it has to be in public, so maybe we can be it resolved that Mr. Morozek can address the board and tell us exactly let's see, the opportunity to correct misinformation using the words. If he wants to address the board at the beginning of the next board meeting, would that be helpful to you?
Let me have my chance and then I'll get it back to you. I know that since that vote, there have been a huge amount of hours put in by a huge number of people in terms of going back over that APPR contract. I think there has been consideration of since it isn't at the point that people want it, do you toss it aside and start anew? Or do you work with it where it is? I don't think that's my job as a board. I think that's the people on the APPR committees. I think that's the teachers and the principals and the people who have been designated to work on that with the teachers union. And I think with the fact that they've done a huge amount more work even since that vote, I think we should give them a chance to move into the future. And I don't think looking back and placing blame on any one person or any group of people for quote-unquote taking this down. I don't think anybody meant to take it down. I think everybody was trying their hardest to come up with a plan that was satisfactory. But I would be proposing that we allow that plan to go into the future without going back and dredging things up from behind. I'm not sure. Let me see if anybody will get it back to you, Sally. You had a chance already. Matt, do you have anything that you want to be saying?
It's her motion.
Do you have any comments that you want to be making before I go back to Sally? No? Okay, that's his back.
Obviously, with the vote being 73% against, there's a lot of unhappy people out there. I think you need to hear, myself personally, I think you need to hear as to why this went down. I looked at the sheets. They had 6 boxes in every one of the school buildings put in on the 14th of January asking, why did you vote against this plan? Number 1, in all 6 buildings, distrust superintendent, distrust of administration. You need to know why. That's not going away. What needs to change? That's not going away. We may need to bring in someone from the outside, such as BOCES, to come in and talk about APPR, give guidance, lend a hand, because they've done it with other districts. But you need to find out why the 73%. If there was a no confidence vote, which the union could have called for, it would have been more dismal than that.
Seems to be that at the moment we have a motion that's on the table. That's been made and seconded. And the motion, as I understand it, is to have this meeting. At the moment it's being proposed to be on Tuesday, February 19th. And it's proposed to be a meeting that brings together the HTA leadership, the contract committee, the board, all together to discuss what went wrong in terms of the APPR. So I guess we'll go ahead and have a vote on that motion. Do we want to vote as a group? Do we want to vote individually? Excuse me, I'm sorry? Roll call vote. Patty?
As with the resolution reading, I have to vote no, only for the fact that I just believe we're still in negotiations. And I have to say, I kind of like Holly's suggestion as well.
Okay, so you're voting no, Matt? And for myself, also voting no, we're still in negotiations.
Oh, no.
There are no negotiations. The district hasn't responded to the letter of intent.
It's a vote going on at the moment. I'm sorry, we don't even have to have a...
The district hasn't responded to the letter of intent. The district has not responded to the...
I'm sorry, we're in the midst of a vote. So Sally, you voted? Yes. Okay. Colleen?
I'll vote yes, but as it stands, I would like some of the verbiage changed. That would be okay, just so we can make it so that everybody can attend.
So at the moment, the vote is 5-2. Do we want to, as a board, do we want to bring this up again and see if we can figure out a different way to go through this? But for the moment, it's been voted down at a 5-2.
Okay, and then maybe we can have some amendments.
Come up with a plan of another way of approaching this. That would be great. Okay, I think that's the last thing we have scheduled for today's meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn? A second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much.
Even the year they played us there, they're like, kids again. Much more exciting than this. I said, oh, it's all the Pedro show. All right, good night. Thank you. Let me know if you need anything else. All right, thank you very much.
Yes. Bye, Sally.
I